It's Pharrell and Lil Uzi Vert.
That's the Pokemon song?
Neon Guts, I believe the name of the song. No, that's not the Pokemon song.
Okay.
Can't play that yet.
I'm like, why?
I just uploaded that to Master. So yeah.
So let's talk. What do you want to talk about today? Let's talk about what the session is first. What's in it, and what do you want to talk about? And then I'll be guided by you.
Okay. Well, it's a bunch of Pharrell sounds. It's a bunch of nice 808s and kicks and good stuff like that.
Got a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah. He's I get a lot of questions about low end and how the low end works together and how the kicks work with the 808s and that kind of stuff. So this is actually a perfect song to kind of dive into that and just talk about some low end stuff, mainly about how low end. Everybody always wants to know, like, how do you get your kicks and your 808s to work together, and how does low end impact X, Y, and Z? And it's
right.
about, it's about just really making sure that they work together, figuring out the frequencies that, which frequency is confused with another frequency and which frequencies are working together.
So they're all kind of sitting on a sound stage together, so you just want to make sure they're not cluttered.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
So, so we can look at some things that I did here. So as you can see, with Pharrell, because his sounds are so clean and so nice, a lot of times I don't even add a whole lot of like plugins and stuff to his particular sessions.
Right.
A lot of my plugin usage is going to be down here on like my aux tracks, and so we have like this is Uzi's vocal.
Yeah, it's a ton of stuff on there.
Yeah, so we have like, of course, our trusty de-esser. We have the EQ. We have compressor, favorite compressor ever. We have our SSL channel. My trusty CLA. Love this thing. It's a good, nice little utility box to get some things going.
Totally is.
So it's a lot of fun.
And then you've got a 76, another de-esser, and another R compressor.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. And I think the reason I did that is because Uzi, when I de-ess the first time, and as I go through some of the EQing and the compression and stuff like that, Uzi has a tendency to have this weird frequency range going on in his voice, and
right.
a ton of auto-tune and all that stuff. He puts that on there before, and so I got to kind of just make sure everything is clear and, coming through thick and nice.
Okay, so he's recording his stuff at home and then you're adding it into the session?
Yes.
That's annoying.
Yeah, tell me about it.
All right, cool. So let's talk about the multiple bass and kicks, because they're so clean in this session.
Yeah. So what we have here, while I find them.
And I got a colorful aura, like I got neon.
So yeah, those worked so well together that for me it was just a matter of levels at that point. It was just a matter of figuring out 808 kick relationship, and they just have such a nice thick sound together. It wasn't much to do there, So this is my version of very minimalist mixing.
I mean, I guess one of the things that definitely should be pointed out is, like, just because you have plugins doesn't mean you should use them on everything.
Right. You don't have to just go crazy and slap a whole bunch of plugins on everything.
Right.
So, my man right here, I know you always got a question. Yeah. I know you got questions.
What's the question, Wesley?
I mean, really, my question kind of got answered, but like just really thinking, like, my bad for your shot, but just really thinking, like, what frequencies do you find to, I guess, give you trouble, within the 808 and the kick?
It just depends. Sometimes, that's a good question. So sometimes what you'll have is, you'll have like the boxy chest frequencies of like an 808 that's messing with the same frequencies in a kick. They're competing, and you'll hear like things kind of phasing or canceling out. Yeah. And it's important to kind of recognize which frequencies, which thing you want to have that frequency. And a lot of times, if you have a kick where it's giving you some chest frequencies and it's punching, you want to open that space up in the 808 and let the 808 just be more soft and round. And so it's always it's not a specific number to answer your question. It's always about listening to the sound and figuring out where's the clashing happening, and then going from there. Make sense?
So when you're dealing with so many low frequencies, especially with things like 808s and stuff here, what kind of volume do you listen to when you're mixing it so that you know everything is going to come through and translate to your audience? Because a lot of the audience of this kind of music, obviously, they're constantly in their cars.
Right. And a lot of times when I'm mixing, I'm always I mix loud for like maybe 5-10 minutes per mix, and then most of it is at a really pretty low level. I'm always mixing with the fact in mind that most people consume the music in headphones, in their cars.
Right.
That's the kind of listening environment that most people consume music. So I'm always kind of mixing with that kind of mind frame of, let me make sure, see what it sounds like in the car, see what it sounds like in headphones, that kind of thing.
If you could, would you take every single subwoofer out of every single lowered car so that it didn't ruin your music? Yeah. All right, so your session organization is super pristine. How do you go about organizing what's what when it's something that's a collaboration like this, where you've got Pharrell, you've got your main artist, and then you've got all these different drums and different. How do you organize it? Because I don't see a lot of colors.
Yeah, I tend to think like a console. So a lot of times, I'm from the old school, so I kind of organize like I would on a console, left to right, where I have like drums and like kick, snare. I have my bass kind of like in the middle of the console sometimes. Then vocals and da-da-da. Same thing with Pro Tools, where I arrange from top to bottom, where I have like the drums and the kick, snare and the bass and then the vocals, and so I kind of think in my mind like a console, a large format console when I'm mixing and I arrange my sessions. And I think I say this all the time. It's important to focus on organization, color coding, making sure things are very readable and legible, in the sense of when you look at a session, you can kind of get a sense of some sort of organization. Being organized keeps you from making mistakes.
Right. So in this case, Pharrell is blue.
Yep, Pharrell is blue.
So you've got him on 6 tracks. Is that? What's your thinking behind that, or is it all?
That's how they sent it.
That's how they sent it.
This is how the session comes to me, and I just try to, for the sake of efficiency, I try to kind of walk within the framework of what they have going on, so I'm not spending a whole lot of time trying to rearrange everything and then mix. I just mix based on what they send, and it keeps things efficient. It helps keeps things organized as well, because they may have something send into a specific thing or go in a specific place, and it just kind of keeps things, kind of centralized, and it also helps to kind of keep it as close to when they sent it, so that when he calls back and say, hey, my track number 3, da-da-da, if I rearrange everything, what he's talking about now doesn't apply to what I'm looking at.
So is that kind of the same thing as people getting emotionally attached to their rough mixes before you actually get them? How do you deal with that? Because, people spend so much time with their rough mixes, and then you have to make it sound good, but that's what they're used to hearing.
Yeah, and I use the rough mix as a base, and so I don't try to start from scratch and go away from the rough mix. What I try to do is use the rough mix as a base. I try to honor what's there, honor what they were hearing, what they were trying to accomplish, and then go from there and build on the rough mix and make my mix, a little better than the rough mix. But yeah, it's important to kind of honor the sound that they created and what made them love the song in the first place.
How do you deal with things, especially in this genre of music, when people come and say, okay, it's like, right, I want this to sound like such and such, or I want this to sound like, I know you mix Pharrell, so I want this to sound like Pharrell, etc. Yet there's nothing about their music that sounds even remotely like that person.
Yeah, sometimes when somebody's telling you, well, I want something to sound like Pharrell, and then they play the song and it sounds nothing like him, right? A lot of times what they're really trying to communicate is there's something about that song, whether it's the hi-hats are really loud, or something about that song that they love, and they don't know how to communicate. So the best thing they know how to do is just to refer to it. So I think sometimes it requires a little bit of my brain work to go in there and figure out, okay, this song sounds nothing like their song, but what about this song is making them love it that I can incorporate? So that's usually the trick.
So it's psychological.
Yeah. And it happens to be that way sometimes where somebody will say, hey man, make my mix sound like this mix, and then holding it sounding separate songs. But then the one distinct factor I can hear is the hi-hat is super loud in that mix that they refer to, and I'm like, oh, so I'll just make their hi-hat super loud, and 9 times out of 10 it works, and then they go, oh yeah, that's what I want.
Talking about super loud, I mean, obviously we're going through these wonderful times called the loudness wars. When you send a mix to a client and they say it's not loud enough, you need to make it louder, it's like, do you have to spend some time actually explaining this is not mastered? Or do you have, or do you just send them something with an L on it just to keep them happy for a while? Or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, usually it's you kind of try to work with the actual artist and see, some people just, you can explain to your face is blue and they still won't get it. And so it's just about kind of figuring out how to put a Band-Aid on it for the moment, whether it's using the L1, L2, boosting the signal up to make it super loud, just for their purposes. And then when I send it to mastering, I don't put that stuff on the stereo bus. But for the most part, if you explain that, they get it, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. And you explain that that's the purpose that's one of the functions of mastering. They kind of tend to back off of it.
Right. Okay. Now I'm noticing you've got a lot on Pharrell's auxiliary as well. Is that the same kind of process exactly as Uzi?
Pretty much, and the thinking behind that is to also honor it's pretty much the same set of plugins, the same setup, and trying to just keep them in the same space.
Right.
Because if Pharrell sounds totally different from Uzi, then all of a sudden they don't even feel like they're on the same song together.
Right.
So it's about trying to honor the same space, the same reverbs, the same effects, kind of, sort of, just putting them in the same vibe.